are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the first in 2022, a special edition of In the Weeds with Jimmy Young. And we are very excited about getting this one going. As always, we expect you to like, share, and subscribe, not only to the In the Weeds with Jimmy Young podcast and In the Weeds with Jimmy Young show, but also all the original content on Pro Cannabis Media. We talk news, Green Rush Live, which is our Business of Cannabis show. And we've got some really exciting news about new shows coming your way, yours being the public's way. In fact, one of them is going to be called Calling All Growers with Liz Grow from Grow House Media. She's been the host of the Grow House series on High Times TV for a couple of years, and we're very excited to be adding a growing show to the Pro Cannabis Media growing opportunities for our programming. And whenever we have a guest from California, I reach out to our California correspondent on We Talk News. His name is Christopher Smith from the American Cannabis Report. Christopher, great to see you again in 2022, and Happy New Year.
Good to see you, Jimmy. Happy New Year to you.
And we are also very happy to be joined by an author, someone who comes from La La Land, LA, Los Angeles, California. His name is Jared Kesselman. Jared, thank you for joining us today.
Yes, thank you for having me, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you as well. You have written a book called oh, you know what? Here's the thing. I know it's a blueprint for success in the cannabis industry. What's the name of the book called, Jared?
Well, The Business of Cannabis, a blueprint to a high income.
High H-I-G-H. I got it. I got it. As soon as I read it, I got it. All right.
You
So
did?
yeah, absolutely. Here's the part that is also on that book cover. It says strategies for 20 years in the game. Now, Jared, you don't look like an older person like me. So I want to ask you, what was the first year you were actually in the cannabis business? And that was 20 years ago?
Yes, I'm actually 40 years old, and I was 20. I had just turned 20. So
what was your first job? What was your first job in the cannabis business? I think is a better question.
I actually started my own delivery service.
Great.
In 2000. It wasn't big, but it was the beginning, and I learned a lot. And it was the beginning of my growth and kind of journey and adventure through this wild industry.
That's right. And Christopher, I want you to jump in whenever you want. You can interrupt me, you know that, and ask a question, because the one thing that I'm intrigued by, obviously California in 1996, I'm pretty sure, was the first medicinal marijuana state, right?
Correct.
Right. So here we are in 2022 now. And everything I read coming out of California, especially from the American Cannabis Report, is all about the dysfunction of that market. So I guess the first question is, from your eyes, what happened?
Well, several things. This is a very loaded question, but
thank you. That's why I figured I'd start it off this way. Go ahead.
Yes, great question. So one, there's a long history of this industry, which is it's difficult for it to emerge out of. Well, I'll explain that a little in greater detail, but also heavy regulation, which makes it very difficult to just get your product to the market.
Mm-hmm.
Over taxation, which makes it very expensive to get your product to the market, and in turn, very expensive for the end consumer, which comes back around to my first point, which is a long history emerging from the shadows as a black market, unregulated industry. Now pricing so high due to overtaxation drives these end consumers back into the black market. One. Number two, they allowed too many cultivators to come online. And I believe a lot of people had big green eyes. They were excited. They wanted to get involved. They hear great things. It's a new bubbling industry. And what happens is so many new light depth grows and indoor grows came online in California that there was an oversupply of flower. And what happens is a lot of that has to leave the state because California can't gobble up all that flower. It's too much for the licensed market in California. So what ends up happening is, again, unfortunately, the black market purchases a lot of that flower and it goes throughout the country. So to answer your question, the reason people say it's kind of unorganized or in shambles is there's kind of a weighing going on between the regulated market and the black market, and they're doing a dance right now. And it's unfortunate, but to be quite honest, without the black market right now, the pricing on flower in the bulk market and in general would plummet, and it already has gone down a lot due to the oversupply. And if you didn't have that outlet, I would say 2/3 of the flower leaves the regulated market. So
I am
if you didn't have
shocked.
that outlet, where would pricing go? So that's this is the dance going on right now.
I guess
The third piece of that, Jimmy, I think, in terms of just what the news will tell you.
Yep.
The third piece of that is that the way, and it's in support of what Jared just said, the regulations made this very, very difficult. One of the principal regulations in California that I feel is a mistake that keeps getting replicated over and over. We just saw it happen in New York, which is that they allow the cities and the towns the option to opt out of cannabis, right? They can say, we don't want cannabis in our state, in our town, in our city. And in California, we have 68% of the towns opted out. Yep. So like Jared said, there's a massive supply because all these growing licenses went out, but there's a tiny little avenue for retail sales because 68% of the towns said we won't allow it. So California has created a pinch, and they've created a kind of a bottleneck that speaks to exactly why what Jared is saying, and that's why it's happening as well.
Well,
absolutely, Chris.
And Christopher and Jared, this is one of my biggest pet peeves with what's going on in our governing entities, whether they be at the town level, the city level, the state level, and obviously the federal level as well. The people that have voted for this in their communities, know more about this product than the people that have been elected to those seats to run the towns.
Yes, sir.
Right. And they forget the fact that, we're not a true democracy. I get that. We're a republic. But if a town has a vote, if you have a ballot question and that town has voted to pass this retail, shouldn't the second question on that ballot be, do you want it in your backyard or not? Because, right.
Built in.
People will say, no, I think it should be legal. I just don't want it in my backyard. It's the NIMBY effect, right? The not in my backyard effect that has really retarded the start of a lot of these state legal entities, and the elected officials, again, continue to treat this plant medicine as an evil weed.
Sure.
What do you think of that comment, Jared?
Well,
I agree, and I like it. I think it's a long history that's difficult for these policymakers to brush off. And truth be told, a lot of them come from the time where it was the evil weed and the weed mania and all these publications and promotions of cannabis in a negative light. And I think it's just taking a long time for these people to come around. And I also think, to what Chris said, which is, it's very difficult when it's legal here and next door it's not legal. Like now, from a business standpoint, I'll give an example of Sylmar. Sylmar is an area in the North San Fernando Valley in LA. All north of it, you have the whole Santa Clarita Valley. Santa Clarita did not allow any retail stores. So what's great for Sylmar, because all those customers have to come to the Sylmar stores and they're seeing 800, 1,000 patients a day. It's great for them. But as Chris was saying, from a, trying to clean this up standpoint, it's very difficult when you have neighboring cities. One allows it and one doesn't. It opens up the black market in that city that doesn't. And it also, they're missing a huge, all that money should go to that city. Instead, it's coming into Sylmar. And there's countless examples of neighboring kind of jurisdictions where you see the same situation. So it's, it should be more universal. They need more universal regulations and kind of executing this.
Right.
Well, what's amazing to me, Jared, is that even in this environment that's so challenging, and the whole country's reading about our trials out here in California, even in this trying environment, you have managed to make a successful business.
Yes.
Basically, you created it yourself. I mean, you're kind of, in my estimation, you're kind of the American dream kind of guy. I mean, seriously, because you're in a lot of ways, you're not any different than any other great entrepreneur who has become successful, pulling up his own bootstraps and inventing his own path, right? I mean, you created a path that didn't exist. In 2020, there was no path.
Right.
and you managed to find the path. So, I mean, I have to say hats off to you for all the
Thank you so
success
much.
you've had. And it's a
Thank
funny
you.
thing. As I was reading your book, I'm thinking this is a guy who probably had kind of a high school career, like maybe a little more like Jeff Spicoli from, Ridgemont High movie. And yet he writes a book that's like Elon Musk. Like, how did we put those two things together? This guy's amazing, So I was really looking forward to talking to you. So I'm just so curious, how many, like, you're a guy who's been 100% in cannabis your whole career, right?
Correct.
How many guys that you run with, and women, of course. I mean, of course, I don't mean that to be gender specific, but how many men and women in your daily life are lifers, are 100%, cannabis or die kind of people versus new people coming in the business?
It's a great question. So a lot of the newer people you meet more so will be newer to the industry. But a lot of my circle are lifers. And I mean, for example, like with True Classic OG, so I know we discussed it. So I'm the director of sales and distribution for True Classic OG.
Okay. We'll get back to that in a second.
We'll get back
just to clarify. Yeah.
Yes. But just so I bring that up just to say, all these guys are lifers, from our head cultivator. He's been breeding and working genetics and crossing different strains for 20 plus years.
Yeah.
The actual founder of this company, my partner, David, he's also growing since 1996. Great story. Started in the closet with one light and built this incredible business. So
amazing.
I am around a lot of lifers, but to your point, there are a lot of newer faces and people in this industry. So it's strange because there's kind of a dichotomy. You have your old school guys and you have your newer school guys that are really kind of coming in from more different industries and corporations and are trying to kind of jump in on this wave and kind of this foundation that's already been built. It's so it's interesting right now. It's actually I'm seeing a lot of action and movement and buyouts, and you're going to see 2022 be a very tumultuous year in cannabis. And I wish the best for everybody, but I'll be quite honest. I think it's going to be, you're going to see some brands and companies go under, get bought out, see some consolidation and kind of a restructuring of the industry.
Seems like, but if you don't mind, Jimmy, I just keep going. Your book seems to be really geared toward or written for people who are just starting out in the industry, right? Mm-hmm. So if you were talking, like if someone came to you and say, Jared, how am I going to get in? I really want to be in the business. This is rock and roll. I really want to be there. How do I start? How do I get in?
Right.
Get a lawyer. That's the first thing.
No, but I mean, I'm just talking about so Jimmy, I think what you're referencing is if I'm a company and I want to get started, how do I get licensed? I'm talking about a person. I'm talking about just some young man or woman who is trying to start their career and they really want to be in this industry for all the reasons that we all appreciate. How would they get started? What do you think?
I'll tell you this. So let's assume you don't have money and you don't know people in the industry and you're not that thoroughly educated on cannabis and the business of it. I would say definitely two positions. They're entry level. You can enter without much experience and you will learn so much and meet so many people. That would be a sales rep for a brand or a bud tender at a retail store. As a sales rep, you're going to learn all the brands. You're going to learn the pricing, learn the product types. You're going to get to speak to people, speak to all the purchase managers, build up a very valuable network that you can use later to kind of climb up the ladder. And as a bud tender, you're kind of on the front lines of the industry. You're dealing with customers. You're seeing what they like, what they want, what sells, what doesn't, why, what price points. You get to see how a retail operation works, and you get to see the different positions involved as well. So those are great experience that you'll learn from both. You'll build a great network and definite starting points to kind of build your career in this industry. Yeah.
It's a thing that you talk about through the book quite a bit, which is building. Building relationships, building friendships, building you talk about not discouraging anyone, not pushing anyone away. So talk about like some of the relationships maybe that you've built in the industry and how much your career depends on building those kind of friendships and relationships and making things work.
Oh, that's a great question. And I would say it's critical and probably, I wouldn't say number one, maybe, but at least up there for the most important factor of your success, which is building solid relationships and working that network and helping them and them helping you. And the bigger the network gets, the bigger you'll get and the bigger your business will get. Some examples, like I was telling you, I spent a long time in this industry and had to kind of restart again in 2019 at the bottom as a sales rep. And that taught me to go out. I was visiting 10 stores every day in person, getting shut down. These purchase managers, they're busy. They don't have time for you. They deal with 40 vendors. They do not want to see a new vendor they don't know offering a brand or a product they're unfamiliar with. So you have example I'll give you is LA Wonderland, a big popular store here in LA. I go multiple times. I'm seeing the front desk, can't even reach the purchase manager. Eventually on my 6th visit, I'm allowed to see the purchase manager. 4 more times, I'm selling all these product offerings, no deal. On the 10th visit, I finally close a deal, small one, for some live resin sauce and pre-rolls, right?
All right.
Small deal, but it shows the persistence pays off. But now that relationship with that store and that purchase manager led into, I still deal with her today. Great relationship. She buys bulk distillate, bulk flower, much larger deals, consistently buying branded products. So that one situation and persistence and staying with it, and then allowed me to build that relationship, which then grew to a lot of bigger business. And that's one example. There are so many examples like that. And I think the persistence to stick with it, build the relationship and grow that circle. And then it's just amazing the things that start to fall in your lap and the opportunities that present themselves.
All right.
That's amazing.
I want you to ask me that same question that you just asked Jared, because it's a completely different answer.
Okay.
So Jimmy, if somebody came to you and said that they wanted to get in the broadcast business, what would you tell them? How would you guide them and how would you advise them?
First thing I'd ask is, what is your history with the product? Whether it's, I've never tasted it, or I have tasted it, or I've used it since I was 14, or whatever the personal history is. But the next and most important thing, and I preach it because I am one, is educate yourself. Educate yourself through this thing called Google that you can actually find out a whole bunch of crap about if you just ask the right questions. And when I got my medical card in 2013 in Massachusetts, the first place I went was Google and learning about the product. And then I found Green Flower. And I'm sure you guys know greenflower.com and Max Simon and his success story and all that. And they produce some of the best quality instructional videos that I found on the internet. This was right before they got shut down by YouTube. So again, the point is, get education, find out how and what you can learn about this product. And look, right in California, you guys are right in the middle of this thing. Oaksterdam University is right there, right? Isn't that Oakland, one of the biggest ones? I believe get yourself a degree of some kind. And Jared, you suggested an entry-level job as a bud tender. Now, in the medical community, I'm not quite sure we're getting the education we need for bud tenders. If you go in with a medical question and you're reliant on a young person, I'll just say a young person, because pretty much everybody under 64 is considered a young person to me, is going to be the person that is your personal educator. We need to educate the people that are working in dispensaries, especially medical dispensaries, through education. What's your feeling about that, Jared?
Great point, and you're 100% right. And I kind of took it for granted because I had a long-term education myself where I already had the knowledge. But you're right, for someone without the knowledge, critical part of it. I am a big believer in learning on the job through experience, but I agree. An education is always critical, and you can get that through, as you say, Google. Or another thing is, when you talk to all these people, ask them questions, because the great part about it is they love to talk about their business, and who doesn't love talking about themselves? So they'll happily answer all these questions, and you'll learn so much. And in doing so, you're actually going to build a great relationship while learning, and it's free. So I agree, though, the education part, very critical. And now to the second part of your question, which is these bud tenders who kind of now are forced into a role of education and really teacher and doctor in one, right? And, therapist and psychiatrist. So, and they're young and they're not paid well. So the problem is not a lot of resources are put into these people. There should be. Some are, they get trained. Some stores do better than others. But it's funny you mentioned this. I wanted to start this, and I still might, which is like an official bud tender training school where we train them in everything they need to know. They get a certification, and now they can go and work in the real world and be much better prepared. But
Sure.
I only have so much time in a day, but that's something that I would like to accomplish eventually.
It's a great
But
idea.
yes. Mhm.
Hey, I got a question for you. I'm going to switch gears if you don't mind, Jimmy. One of the big questions in the industry, and we spoke briefly about how, you know, we're in the California industry. We are the OGs in a way, in many ways, obviously. And the newer markets that are on the East Coast are really kind of ramping up. So I thought might be interesting to talk about your thinking about a couple of the key things that we've learned out here. Like, here's one, for example. I'd like to hear what you think about it. THC level seems to be like the number one selling point for everything. And it seems to also be the fear point for the regulators, right? Every time you read an article, they're like, this isn't your grandfather's weed. And like, yeah, I know. So what do you think about the real focus on THC versus the other cannabinoids, for example, and the terpenes and all the rest? And do you think that that's a good direction, or do you think that that'll maybe sort of settle down as people learn more about the plant and the various benefits of it?
Yes. I do not think it's a good thing. And I do think it will settle down exactly as you alluded to, which is as people start to understand it more, try more products with different potencies and see the other factors that affect their high and experience with it. As you said, you know, I'm sure people know the entourage effect, which is where the terpenes and all the different cannabinoids inside the plant work together and harmoniously with THC and all the other compounds to give you a full spectrum high, so to speak. So those are much more important. An example, like our OG is say 26%, but I promise you, it's going to get you higher than a lot of flower that's 32 and 34%. And that's what everyone says, because it's just the different terpenes in there and different cannabinoids in that plant. But I think the potency thing is because from a consumer standpoint, it's a younger industry in terms of them seeing all these packaged products with the potency on it. You know, in the old days, you didn't know the potency, right? It was just how high did it get you, or how well did it work in, you know, removing your pain and inflammation or whatever the case may be. But now that they get to see this potency, they get excited about the number, and a lot of the younger generation as well is looking for higher and higher and higher potencies. I would assume, and from what I see personally, is older generations aren't as stuck on the potencies. It's more of a generational thing. And also, to that point, I think once they learn and understand it better, they will not be number hunting as much as they currently are.
Right.
Yeah.
So that will phase. And real quick, I think a good example, I like to relate a lot of cannabis to kind of beer, like how you see craft beer get bought out by big beer. There's a lot of similarities, but like you look at wine, no one really cares. Is it what, 12.5 to 14% basically every bottle? Beer, people look at it, but they're not infatuated with it. So I think as the industry matures, people will put less of a premium on potency.
I think I'm glad to hear you say that. I think that also, to Jimmy's point about it being medicinal for many people, many patients, right?
Yes.
Their goal is not to get high and wipe out on the couch. That's not what they're looking for. They're looking for relief from some issue. So they're not actually trying to get as high as possible. They're trying to get as much relief as possible. So the THC number is, like you said, I think, right, kind of irrelevant to a lot of people. They're like, I don't actually want to get completely wasted and like, you know, be on the carpet. I don't want that.
Right. They have things to do. They can't spend all day on the couch. But to that point, what you're seeing is as kind of science enters the space more and more research is done, you're seeing, you know, there's over 160 cannabinoids in the plant. How many does everyone know? THC, CBD. So now you're seeing CBN, you know, to help people sleep. And like, you know, you mentioned THCV, I believe. And as these other compounds are studied more and introduced into products more, I think it'll be more about which cannabinoids you're using versus the potency of THC or any of them in particular. So that's good. And I see that starting to happen now. So
But Christopher, you're 100% right. I was talking to a friend of mine who is a owner of a dispensary, and he says a lot of people just shop on the highest THC percentage, and they have to go through this whole education process about the TAC, the total active cannabinoids number that's on every one of these products now. So, and you did a great job, Jared, of explaining the entourage effect and how the terpenes are kind of the steering mechanism for the cannabinoids that are in this plant. And when we talk about people who know what they're talking about and education and all this, I'll never forget what Beth Waterfall from Elevate New England here said back on one of our shows. The industry is, we're still learning so much about this plant. There are no experts in it. Jared, you might think that you're an expert because you've been in it for 20 years and you are expert on how to survive in a new industry over 20 years. But if we started getting into the nitty gritty about the CB1 receptors and the endocannabinoid system, that's exactly, you know what I'm saying? It's like, we're all still learning. And Christopher, we talked about that New York Times article about the claim, some of the claims that some of these CBD companies are making and say, oh no, we've got a research study on it. And basically what it is, it's feedback from their customers. And they're calling that a research study, right? That's all we have to go on right now, because the federal government continues to figure out ways to block research on this product that's now being sold to people in each legal state. So I keep going back to education, research, learning, understanding. And even if you learned for 20 years, what gets you high may be different than what gets me high. Because everybody's different, right?
100%. It definitely would be. Yes.
But that's the fascinating component about being in this business, right? That's why I love what you talk about is developing relationships inside the business, networking with the contacts that you've made inside the business as an important factor to launching or growing or starting a company, right?
Yes, definitely. It's and what's interesting is you're right. We're all learning so much and it's changing so fast. That's why I say the best ability might be adaptability in this industry, because things are changing so fast from even what's available, product types. I mean, in the early 2000s, you had flour.
Right.
Then all of a sudden, they created shatter. Right. And then you move into distillate oil. Now it's all these different concentrates, sauces and batters and butters. I mean, you think you're in Martha Stewart's kitchen. It's unbelievable.
Who sells a CBD product, doesn't she?
Yes, yes, she does. Yes.
Hey, Jared, I was curious to ask, if you don't, so sorry to interrupt. Excuse me. But
no problem.
In hearing you unspool the list of all the different products that are available, I'm really curious to hear what you think about what are the most popular products now. What products seem to be kind of on the up? What products seem to be not really that popular anymore? Tell me what you think is really hot selling and what's going on.
Well, so flour is always king. Any store will tell you. Very few. There's certain like concentrate stores where they do a big concentrate business, but almost every store will tell you the majority of their sales are flour, either in jarred up in eighths or quarters or whatever it may be, and or pre-rolls. So that's always going to be king. But moving from there, concentrates, right? They're growing. They're getting bigger. Edibles probably are now moving into the second biggest item. I would think so. But concentrates are very interesting, and we've seen a lot of there's been a lot of growth and change in the concentrate market. I mean, obviously your vape carts were big for a while, and you had the vape lung scare that kind of deterred people and hurt sales, but they're coming back. They're still big. They're discreet. It's very easy. You don't need to light anything. It's somewhat simple. But then there's your direct use concentrates, like this is where you get into sauce and batter and butter and sugar. And I think what we've seen there, what's interesting, and I like, although it's a little pricier, but it's a lot better, is where instead of extracting from the cured dry trim like you do for most of the concentrate, they take the live, fresh, frozen. So now when you have a tray of your flour, you freeze it immediately when it's done. You bug
right off the field, right? I mean, really, right in there, freeze. Yeah,
right in there. You put it in a freezer immediately. We've done this for a company. Actually, we collaborated with them. Then they did a cold press, which is unique amongst the industry. No BHO. So you have no solvents and you're not heating anything up. So you're not killing it. It's going fresh from the plant, frozen, cold pressed, boom, into a beautiful live rosin. And that's what I was mentioning, which is the live products that come from the fresh frozen plants. that have all the cannabinoids in them, and you don't lose them when you're going through the curing and drying process. So those are much tastier products, better terpene profile, and just overall, in my opinion, better and probably healthier. I mean, again, Jimmy, you're right. Not enough research to say this for a fact, and I'm not a doctor, but I do believe they're healthier and you're getting more medicinal benefits from it as well. So I like the evolution into live products from the fresh frozen versus the cured. But yeah, and in terms of market dominance, I would say edibles are right behind flower. And then there's a lot of evolution in edibles as well. We're seeing, for me, a little bit. I'm a little disappointed in the edible market because it's very one-dimensional to me, and it's sweets, and it's obviously sugar is the carrier for a lot of the THC in a lot of these products, and there are rules and regulations because you can't have seafood, you have to have a long shelf life, has to be dry, blah blah blah. But basically, it's gummies. It's gummies and some chocolates. Like, I just feel we can do a lot better, and we can really expand the offerings of edibles, in my opinion. And I think you'll see that moving forward. And last but not least, sorry to ramble, beverages. Beverages you're seeing really start to catch on. It's slow because when you think cannabis, you don't think drinking, but you're seeing this really start. A company called CAN too. I'm not affiliated with them, but I have to give them credit. They're doing well. Sure. No preservatives, all natural. I think it's just lemon juice to keep it to give it the long shelf life. And you're seeing a lot of growth in the beverage market and evolution in terms of how they're made and the quality of them as well. So that's kind of exciting.
I think the edibles are interesting. There's a company called Fruit Slabs that I'm a fan of as well. And a little shout out for that. Similar to you, I don't have any affiliation, but know the founder, etc. And but they're sugar free, for example. So and vegan. So that I think your point about the sugar is a problem for a lot, and with this company they've sorted out that problem. It's just an interesting interesting pathway forward, I think.
That's great. And one other quick note on that I thought was interesting. Someone else decided to use protein to carry the THC, which I understand is actually better than the sugar molecule to distribute it to your system. They actually created beef jerky. It was a beef jerky edible. So, it had the little smoked sausages, 10 of them on there, 10 milligrams each, 100 in the whole pack. I think they had a habanero flavor, a teriyaki glaze, but it was just, I thought it was unique and interesting,
Wow, that's pretty amazing. Yeah. I think, but I think even to your original point, we're at the beginning of so many things. Like you just said, when you started, there was flour, period. That was it. And there was hash, right? But in the ancient tradition, right? But I mean, so there's flour, there's hash, and now look at it. You go in and it's like it's like the Apple store, right? You go in, there's a little bit of this, a little bit of that. You can pick any way that works for you.
Yes.
I think the variety is amazing.
There has, and you're right, a lot of growth. I mean, we might think it's not growing fast enough, and sometimes I think I have to kind of catch myself. Yeah, it is growing. It is growing fast and evolving. It's just a lot of catching up to do relative to other industries that had 150-year starts.
Yeah, for sure. Well, one of the things you talk about in your book is, and I want to add two separate things. Mm-hmm. One is that you talk a bunch about working both sides, working both sides of a relationship, of a deal, of like a grower and a manufacturer, and working with both of them to get a mutually successful conclusion. Yes. So my question would be, how did you get into such a place where you actually understand both sides so well that you can actually tell each of them that they, how they can work together better, that kind of thing? Maybe that's the only question. Maybe that's it. How much time, how much experience does it take for you to learn both sides so that you can actually help both work together successfully?
That's a great question. It does take a lot of time because you really have to understand what's important to each side and why, and then realize that them collaborating or doing a deal together benefits both sides, and understanding why. So I can clearly explain it to one side as well as the other, and then facilitate that deal. Sure. And based on the trust and experiences that they have with me on both sides. So you have to build those relationships. And then back to Jimmy's point, you really do have to educate yourself as to what's needed. So I'll give one example. We had a tray of Oreos. It's a strain, Oreos that we grew indoor here in Chatsworth. And we decided to do a collaboration with Kalia. So I brought both sides to the table. And basically this was understanding, look, we could sell that flower immediately, right? Especially at that time in the market. So it's about 25 pounds worth. We could bag it, sell it immediately. We've recouped all our money. So from the cultivator side, it's like, why do I want to freeze this? I have to wait for them to press it. Then there's the whole sales going in. You do the numbers. Maybe I make a little more, but there's the marketing. It's you have to explain to them why it's worthwhile. So we froze it. We had them pick it up in their frozen truck and they pressed it. And I was able to explain to the cultivator, look, you're going to get your money back. You're going to have to wait a little bit, but it's okay. You're going to get a little bit more as well. And most importantly, they're going to co-brand the product. It's going to have your brand on it. This is a high-end extractor that's well known in other areas that we aren't yet. You're going to get your brand on their collaboration. So now we're respected on their level. And you get a ton of exposure and marketing and still make the money you would have anyway, as well as building this relationship that you can then do further collaborations with down the road. So it's just explaining the elements and benefits of these collaborations. And it just,
Fantastic.
it takes time to understand what they are. Yes, to answer your question.
Right. Sure.
I got a question I'm going to throw in here about your book. And, you know, a lot of these books on the business of cannabis are focused on the grow, the licensing, the delivery, the retail, the wholesale of that product. However, there's a whole bunch of other companies out there, and Christopher, I think you know where I'm going with this one, okay, that are ancillary companies that take money from the cannabis industry and are immediately categorized as a marijuana-related business, an MRB. Us, okay, for instance, we're an MRB.
Okay.
How challenging, it's just as challenging to be in the ancillary side as the grow side and manufacturing side, because you still don't have access to banking and banks. And it's driving us crazy a little bit over here at Pro Cannabis Media, but I'm so close to being crazy anyway. It's really easy for me. So
hard to tell the difference, Jimmy.
You're lying.
So Jared, do you get into the ancillary side of the businesses at all in your book? That's where I'm asking here.
Not really in the book. It's pretty much all hands-on cannabis focused, but your banking point is a serious issue, and it's very unfortunate because what happens is everyone just takes advantage, right? Everybody knows. So now you can't go directly to a bank. So now you can't get a fair interest rate on a loan. You have to go to a hard money lender that's going to charge you an arm and a leg.
Yep.
Two, even if you want to deal with the bank, you have to go through a third party. There's these third party guys I'm sure you're familiar with now, where they can kind of be the intermediary where they deal with the bank with your money, you know, but that's obviously, there's a fee for that. Usually it's 1% on everything, which is ridiculous. And this kind of, I hate to go off track, but this kind of go like retail stores in LA, there's a 10% gross tax for all money they generate, retail stores. So this money, this is again going back to just, there's a lot of greedy hands that are uneducated and don't understand the industry, that are just trying to extract every dollar and coin out of anyone in the industry, or like, as you mentioned, even related to the industry. And it really is a shame. And in the end, who pays? The end consumer, who has to pay way too much for his product. And we've discussed what that does. So it's kind of it's a vicious cycle that you see, and it's disappointing.
There's a lot of things that have to change as this industry matures, because it's going to mature. It's not going anywhere. It's now here. So Jared, we're up against it a little bit. I'd like you to give another plug to your book and to the company that you're involved with now.
Sure, you got it. Well, the book is called, I'll put it up here.
There it is, The Business of Cannabis.
Yes,
I can read.
Blueprint to a high income. Hopefully it helps you out. Really, I just it's a lot of my personal experiences, personal deals that I've been through, lessons I've learned, strategies to win for all levels in the supply chain, from cultivation down to retail, as well as selling bulk and sales strategies, and a lot of just business lessons I've learned from, persistence and things that probably can be carried outside of cannabis as well. Just from a lot of lessons that I've learned, and hopefully it's helpful to you guys. It's available on Amazon. And then the company I'm with now, who I love, True Classic OG, great story. We're all old school guys. We grow every gram we sell. We stay true to the strain, which is a true OG strain, a cut from the late 90s that we've been growing since 2003. Piney, gassy, delicious. And really, we're a little unique in that that's what we do. True OG, it's dependable, it's the same every time, and it's delicious. We don't try to master 40 different strains and you like some, you don't like some, hit and miss. We give you one thing. We're the Coca-Cola of the industry. We're the In-N-Out burger. We keep it simple and we do it right and it's fairly priced. So I think that's a good concept. And my advice to anyone starting a business, similar thinking, that's it. Don't overthink it. Keep it simple, keep it fairly priced, and keep it consistent. And I think you have a good shot at success.
There you go. So that is Jared Kesselman. His book is The Business of Cannabis. Yes, you can get it on Amazon. So for Christopher Smith, one of our correspondents on Weed Talk News from the American Cannabis Report, Jared Kesselman, the author, the guy who's been in this space for 20 years, he knows how you can maneuver your way in. Check it out on Amazon. For our production staff here at Pro Cannabis Media, I'm Jimmy Young. Thanks again for watching, listening, and following Pro Cannabis Media. We'll check you out next time. And remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly. Weed Talk and In the Weeds are two productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first.
Difference is building a solution for that individual, not just a custom, here's a box, here's a video, here's how you make your VMS. We custom design and custom build every situation for exactly what the customer needs. And we keep the costs low. We have multiple tiers, as far as what you're looking at on the cost side of things. If you want a one-time, where you just pay one initial cost, we have that. If you want to maintain your system and have the highest protection and highest capabilities and highest upgrades at all times, we have different plans for you. But we scale it so it's scalable and affordable 100%.
Pro Cannabis Media programming is available live and on demand on our Facebook page at Pro Canna Media, on Instagram at Pro Cannabis Media, on LinkedIn also at Pro Cannabis Media, on YouTube and YouTube Live on Pro Cannabis Media, Twitter at Pro Canna Media, and on twitch.tv/Pro Cannabis Media. So like, share, and subscribe to all of our content, newsletters, and shows live or on demand.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.